So for this repair, you will need the following tools. We're using an 8mm box end or wrench, a 90-degree pick, a flathead screwdriver, a wobble will help. You could probably do it without, but this is a 1/4-inch wobble, a 1/4-inch drive or a 1/4-inch ratchet. You'll need a 7mm socket. You'll need an E4 and E5, which is an inverted Torx basically, socket. So you'll need an E4 and an E5. You'll need a 10mm socket. You'll need a T25 Torx. Flashlight really helps, and zip ties help as well to get the harness back in place where it needs to go, as well as your dikes or some kind of cutter to cut the zip ties. And obviously you'll need the part as well. The one that we purchased ended up being a Duralast part. The dealership actually has discontinued this part, and the part number is here. I'll also put it in the description down below. And if you have something to organize the bolts, it really helps as well. As you take them apart, you can put them all back in the same place. These are grip mats. If you guys are interested in these, I love them. I'll link them down in the description below. But this is what you'll need to do the repair. And I would expect for somewhere between an hour and 2 hours to do the complete repair. If you're somewhat experienced with working on vehicles, it's not anything that's too complicated. But let's get into it. So the very first thing you want to do is disconnect the battery. This is an 8mm. You can disconnect the black or the negative side, and then we can start the repairs inside the truck. So the first thing that you need to do is remove the 4 7mm bolts that are in the dash here. Like I said, there's 4 of them, 1 under the parking brake, 1 to the left of the steering column, and 2 to the right. The furthest one is over by the cigarette lighter over in this area. Here. So go ahead and get those removed. Next, you're going to want to remove the parking brake handle. You can pull it out, and there's a little place where you can put a flathead screwdriver in here to release it. And it'll pull off. You just got to hit the 2 tabs right here and right here with the flathead screwdriver. Now the rest of this dash kind of pops off. And you will need to come back over here to remove the rest of this bracket here. Basically just spins. Now you can see basically what's pulling out on the top side after you undid the bolts was basically these metal little clips here. They just clip in, so you're gonna set this away. I'm gonna leave mine here on the ground just because we have the trailer brake still connected, but yours you can move completely out of the way. Next, there are 4 10mm bolts you need to remove here, 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 and here. This is to remove the plate to give yourself a little bit better access, so go ahead and remove those. So next, you want to take a T25 Torx bit and remove the 2 Torx screws that are here. There's one right here, and there's one right here as well. Just go ahead and pull those out. So once you've got those 2 screws off, you can go ahead and take the tilt. It's best if the steering wheel is all the way up. Go ahead and take your tilt and slide it off. You just pull it straight out and set it aside because you want to put it back in here in a minute. On this one, there's a little bit of tape here, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and we'll take this bottom piece off. I believe there's tape on the other side as well, so we'll go ahead and remove that. And now the bottom piece, oh, there's another piece of tape here. And the bottom piece will just slide right off at this point. Go ahead and set it aside. And then we'll go ahead and put the tilt lever back in so that we can tilt the steering wheel down to get the top piece off. Next, to get the top piece off, you're gonna have to have an E5 Torx. And if you're not sure what that is, it basically is an inverted Torx. You can pick them up. I picked up a set from Harbor Freight, Icon set. But you're gonna wanna remove this one right here. So go ahead and remove that. This basically bolts on the top section, and it is an E5. And this one appears actually to be broken. It's spinning the entire shaft here. So the other one is right over here. So here's the key, and if you go a little bit over towards the driver's side, it's that one right up in there. This one is actually broken on this side, so there's no sense in removing it. The tab's broke. Now for the top section, now that you've got those two loose, you're gonna scoot it back to where you expose this collar, because originally this collar is in under the steering wheel. So you're gonna scoot it back slightly with your thumbs, and then you're gonna slowly start to pull up. And you're gonna pull up just enough to sneak a little pick in through here, and we'll remove the key slot so we can take this whole piece off. I'll show you how to do that as well. So this part is pretty hard to see, but what you're gonna do is put the keys in, and you're gonna turn the keys all the way to the on position. So not start, but just to the on position. And then you're gonna take a right angled pick. So I just don't think that I'm gonna be able to show you this hole. I just cannot get the camera angle right. But essentially, once you've got this pulled up and everything's loose, you're gonna go in fact, it's right here on the camera. It's really hard to see. Right in that vicinity, and you're gonna go ahead and push down on it. And at the same time, you're going to come over to the key and turn it back slightly, and takes a little bit, but you'll find that little pressure point and you'll push down, and then the key cylinder will just slide out. And the reason that needs to come out is because there's a full circle here and you can't pull it past the key. So go ahead and set this to the side in similar orientation the way that it came out. And now this whole piece will lift off the top. Be gentle, because the plastic at this point is still a little brittle. And it helps if the wheel is all the way as far down as it can go. And you can start gently lifting this piece off. Just like so. And it just comes off. Go ahead and set that to the side. Now it's best if you go ahead and tilt the wheel all the way up again, as far as it'll go. Now, the harness that we're replacing starts here, and it runs down and goes basically just under this direction. So we're gonna start by pulling it off here, and that takes the inverted Torx. And another thing that we need to do is pull the key position sensor off as well. With this, if you pry up on this little plastic piece, you're gonna pry up on it all the way and push it back through the hole. Kind of difficult to do on camera, but you're gonna push it up. So essentially we depressed this here. This tells us what position that the key is in. We depressed it, and then we slid the whole thing out towards you, away from it, basically, if that makes sense. So once that's removed, you're going to use your Torx, inverted Torx, to remove this. The first screw is here. Make sure not to lose these, because the new one does not come with new ones. And the bottom one is a little bit lower down and on the opposite side, right here. Go ahead and remove that. So the wires run from this around the column here, and it's too tight to just pull this straight off. So if you pull these off the edge here, then you can pull this straight off. And pay attention to the orientation that this is, because you're gonna have to line up the new one in this same orientation. Now we can basically follow these down here, And we're gonna take a bolt out of the harness on this end and we'll pull it all apart. So if you follow this harness down, you can see the bolt directly ahead. It's a 7mm, and it helps if you have a wobble joint to be able to get onto that. Okay, so you can see the one that we just went after here is right there. So once we've got it loose, we can start to remove it. And if you're curious about where it is, this is the steering column right here. So it's just to the left of the steering column. Once I pulled this down, and for a lot of you guys, there's supposed to be a bolt here that bolts it to a bracket up top. There's no bolt on this, this in particular truck. So this was a little easier because this one didn't have to be removed, but I brought this down and was able to unhook the harness, which is this one here. And then I basically took it back over this piece of panel or this piece of pipe here and back through the center so that I can take the other harnesses off of it. So if you look at it, this is the way that it plugs in. This is the way that it plugs in. You've got your green side on the right and your blue and red side on the left. So your green and purple, yellow on the right, and blue, white, and red on the left. These come off of the main harness and they plug back into the new one. So we're gonna get these removed here. So the way that you remove these is very gently get a flathead screwdriver and go in between. Put a little bit of outward pressure on this and it will just slide off. Just like that. They basically slide out towards the plug. You can move it to the side and then do the same thing to this other side here. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. And that one comes off as well. We're gonna leave, they actually are kind of staying in the position that they need to be. So we're gonna go ahead and remove this now. And we can just take it up. So now that we've got these out, we can compare them and make sure that they are the same. Everything looks the same except for this piece, which was not plugged in on this model. I'm not sure what that's for. And it wasn't plugged in, it was just wrapped around the harness here. So I think that we're good to go. Everything else is identical. So we'll go ahead and start installing the new one on the truck. So we want to put it in the same way that it came out. And it was basically right through here. And then just kind of fish through that way. So now we can start hooking everything back up. We're gonna do the opposite now and go ahead and reinstall these. So we've got this one here on this side, the black one. They go in from the bottom, and this one goes in here, just like that. Now we need to loop it back over this rod in here and back down here so we can plug back into the harness and make sure you've got everything lined up. There's a lot of clips going in at once here, and it should start pulling together. Okay, we've got the bolt tightened up here. This should not be tough to tighten up once you've got everything lined up. If you feel like it's binding, you probably don't have the switch aligned or the plug aligned properly, and you need to back off and make sure that it's aligned properly when you're tightening this down. And you'll feel a dedicated hard stop when you get this tight. That way you know you're not over tightening it or anything like that. Now, this vehicle does not have one, but if you see directly over to the left, right there, right above my finger there, there's supposed to be a bolt to bolt this bracket in. This vehicle does not have one. I think that everything will be just fine because it sits down. The bracket for this sits down right through here, and it kind of locks into place. That bolt would be nice to have. I just don't know what thread size, that kind of thing it is. So we're just gonna set it in there like this. It's the way it was before. And as far as the routing goes for the upper section, you basically are gonna come all the way up the top, and this is going to hang across this piece right here. But first we want to hook it up. And remember, we want to make sure it's in the same position as, we want to make sure this key is in the same position as the old one. So we need to actually turn it because it's not in the correct position. For that, you can just use a flathead screwdriver to turn it to make sure that it's lined up properly. So we're basically going to turn this. It only goes in one direction, and you'll hear a very small tick. And that is the position that we need it to go back together. So we're going to go ahead and bring this in. And it should drop into place fairly easily. Just like that. Now we're gonna go get those inverted Torx bits, screws, inverted Torx screws, and we'll put them back in here. And we'll put our key indicator as well, and we'll get the wires reran, and this will be completed. So you'll go ahead and put these back in. Don't drop them, obviously. You don't have to kill these things either. It's just basically snug. You also don't want it to come loose, but it's not a death grip by any means. Good. Now you'll take this wire and run it around the back side. You basically just rotate it back until it clips into place. Now for this harness, originally, once that's installed, you can just take this and run it back around this here, this little casting piece. And this did not have any zip ties on it, but we're gonna put a few in here just to hold it all in place. This one has been replaced. It wasn't a factory one that we were dealing with in the first place, but I definitely want some zip ties. As far as the zip ties go, I want to zip tie these all together right in this section here. And I don't want this super tight, just kind of snug down to keep them together. And I think we need one back in this further section too. Again, you're not killing the wires, you're just snugging them up. Now this vent tube actually goes through here, so you're gonna wanna put that back through this section for when you put it back together. Let's go ahead and put the top piece back on. You wanna make sure you're aligning this boot, the shifter boot, as you kind of come down, and everything should start coming into place here. I have the steering wheel in the furthest down position. And we can go ahead and put the key back in. So the way that it goes in is near the on position again. And then you'll rotate it back. Now with your E5 socket, once your top cover is back on, you can go ahead and start securing this top cover again. A little difficult to line everything up, but you should be able to get it. There you go. Okay, and that just gets snug. Remember, on the other side, ours is broken, so there's nothing we can really do about that one. The steering wheel is tilted all the way up, and we can start putting the bottom cover on now. Goes on the same way that it came off. just like this. And there's 2 areas that it can hang on the back side. You can see these little hangers here. Start tilting this back up into place. And you'll just have to fiddle with it a little bit until it, and once you've got it all good, you can take your T25, which go here. T25 goes here. Now we can put the tilt lever back in here, which goes here. Bring the steering wheel down. Now we can put our metal bracket back in place, which goes right here. These were the 10mm bolts. Now we can reinstall the plastic piece, trim piece. One thing you'll want to do is kind of pull this duct out here, and we'll want to reinstall it on the vent. One thing you'll want to do too is reinstall your hood release, or I'm sorry, your parking brake release. That's just a 1/4 turn counterclockwise this time. And that goes back in place. We'll put the handle on here in just a minute. We're gonna start aligning everything. There's one. Now, if you'd like, you can replace the parking brake. This one simply just pushes back on and it will clip back in place. And we need the 7mm socket again to reinstall these. Excellent. So now that you're done with everything, reconnect the battery and make sure that it starts up. Awesome. And before we had a check engine light for the 6 codes that we talked about at the beginning of the video, and those are gone. I have not even hooked up my code reader to this, but they have all gone away, and it started right up. So it thinks looks like this is a solid repair. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and thanks for watching again. Really appreciate it.